Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jai Om Vishnupad Puraman Supari Praja Kacharja Ashtotar Sri Shrimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai
Jai.
Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kundigiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschata Deshatarane. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha. Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you all for coming. I'm grateful to have your association. If you're identified by a number like 1574 and so on, you might consider renaming yourself. You put your cursor, you click on participants, put your cursor over your number, right click or whatever, and rename if you wish. His Holiness Janananda Maharaj, quite a number of years ago, put together it's like a small book about the Vanaprastha ashram. It's in the form of a manuscript that's been sometimes circulated. An excellent compilation, and more than a compilation, it gives his realizations also. And I'll start by just taking a quotation that he's offered from Srila Prabhupada. Everything is being done by the laws of nature. You cannot change it. There's a plan, God's plan. It will go on. You don't have to bother yourself that without you, everything will be topsy-turvied. No, you cannot do anything. You are falsely thinking that your leadership is very much needed. No. I was thinking, when I was householder, several times there was indication given me by my Guru Maharaj that I should give up family life and become a sannyasi and preach this Krishna consciousness movement. In several ways, there was hints from my spiritual master, but still, I was not willing. I was thinking, if I go away, then my family, my sons, my daughters, they will suffer. But actually, I have left my family connection in 1950. Actually, 54, but introductory in 50, for the last 20 years. But they are living, I am living. They are not dying in my absence, and I am not suffering without being in my family. On the other hand, by Krishna's grace, I have got better family members. I have got nice children in a foreign country. They're taking so good care of me, I could not expect such care from my own family members, from my own children. So this is God's grace. We should depend on Krishna. If Krishna is kind, wherever we go, everyone will be kind. And if Krishna is unpleased, even in your family life, you'll not be comfortable. Therefore, according to the Vedic system, at a certain age, it is indicated that one should retire from family life. So this Rishabhadev Maharaj, he was retired. Although he had 100 sons, all obedient sons, he was emperor, anything was at his command. Still, he was retiring. Although he had 100 sons, all obedient sons, he was emperor, anything was at his command, still he was retiring. That is the Vedic system. He had no disadvantage. He was personally the incarnation of Godhead, an emperor, very obedient sons, and opulence, everything complete. There are many instances. His sons, Bharat Maharaj, he also retired. You have seen Parikshit Maharaj. After his retirement, this Bhagavad was recited before him. his grandfather, Maharaj Yudhisthira, they voluntarily retired. So this was Srila Prabhupada's personal experience. He lived as a householder until 1950, then retired from family life as a Vanaprastha. And he said, with no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958 when I took sannyas. So again, of course, we're not at this point contemplating sannyas. So but Vanaprastha, but the same principles apply. Krishna has some plan. All right, that's my introductory reading. And I'd suggested, and I'm suggesting as sort of a way forward for our ongoing discussions, that we can offer three things especially, that we can notice things that we find in our readings, things that we find in books, things that Srila Prabhupada has said, and we can consider what we've read means, how it might apply to us, and we can also act. We can put our realizations into positive shape. And I suggested that we could share with one another, what have we found in our readings, what are the thoughts that we've had, and what are the steps that we've taken, big or small, or even that we're about to take, that are relevant to our concerns here. So with that in mind, I thought, let's see who might like to contribute something. And the floor is open for you. And anyone can just jump in, I think. We're not such a big group that we need a lot of formality.
It appears that Kamalini Mataji has her microphone unmuted and she may be ready. Are you ready to say something?
Well, I didn't exactly plan it, but I could. Okay, one thing is, since the very beginning, my computer's not working, so I'm on my phone, I hope. But in the beginning, you were speaking about, you know, like simplifying our life and downsizing. And you suggested, you know, give away things to your children, or, you know, try to get rid of stuff. So I've been working on that, and it is not easy because I have this mentality. I'm very keen on utility is the principle. So like everything I see, my brain starts working. All right, how can that be used in Krishna's service? And like my son said, just because it's there doesn't mean you have to pick it up. And so, and plus people know that I'm like that, so they pawn their stuff on me. Like, you know, when cassette tapes went out and now people use whatever electronic, not even disc anymore. So of course everyone gave me their CDs. So I had thousands of cassette tapes, for example. And now I have a couple thousand CDs, but now I just listen audio on YouTube. But it's so difficult to, I hate to throw out things like that. And then especially the written word. I have notes from every single seminar I've ever taken, every class that I've ever attended. I have some notes. So I'll never look at them again, most likely, but it's so difficult to throw them out because someday, you know, they're like someday, like even now, because some of them are so old. And there are some people who also are kind of hoarders, and they and they'll think, wow, I want some of those ancient, archival stuff. And then because of our services, my husband, we've owned a couple of restaurants and we do some catering, although that's down, slowing down. So we have tons of cooking paraphernalia. And then I teach children. I've taught preschool. So I have tons of preschool stuff, even though when I have a group of children over, we only use not even 2% of the material. So, and then books, I spend every penny I get on books. Like when I got my $1,200, what was that called? Stimulus. Right away, every penny I spent on buying books. So I buy more books than I sell. And anyway, that's just an example. And I'm working on it though. I wouldn't say that I'm not working on it, but it's really hard to really let go of all of these things. And I kind of joke that, well, I tell my children, you can have a nice big funeral pyre for me, because I have so much of this stuff. So I love suggestions and, and encouragement to do it, to let go and what to do. And all. So, yeah, that's one thing.
If not the funeral pyre, one can be buried like the pharaohs, with all their stuff.
Yeah. And then, the time it takes to organize it. Like even now, as I'm attempting, I'm finding more than eliminating, organizing, thinking, well, at least I know where it is, and at least I know what I have more than I used to. And but still that's different than eliminating.
Yeah. I took the liberty of posting a link in the little chat window there that is to a book by someone named Marie Kondo.
Oh yeah.
Who's a professional declutterer.
Yeah.
And I figured out Tulsi Priya and I have moved house at least 38 times since we've been married, and we've been married 26 years or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
And when we found this book, it was as the title suggests, it was life-changing, because it's a whole process for seriously considering every item that you own, and whether it's useful to you now, and whether it's something that you need to keep, or can it go on and be useful to someone else. And we have accumulated, as you can imagine, quite a bit of stuff. But since I'm the guy who physically does most of the moving, I was very enthusiastic about this life-changing magic book, and was able to divest myself of a considerable amount of stuff. Some things you just keep because there's a psychological, it's like one of those burdock brambles. It gets stuck in your subtle body. It's hard to extract it. And but this was very helpful, I felt. So that I put that link there.
Yeah, I read that book in 2015, and so I do apply those principles.
Yeah.
And but then I've come to the new realization. She said, do I love this? Does it bring me joy? So then I thought, well, now I have so many things that I love and bring me joy, but it's too many of them. And so I've done that, but I get it to a certain point, and it's hard to go forward, because that, like she says, the easiest thing is clothes. You can go through your clothes. That's the easiest to divest yourself of. Yeah. But then, like I say, like papers. But I used to have 6 filing cabinets, and now I only have 4. So that's a big improvement. But what about books? Like, do you know that I know there's half of my library, I'll never read them again, because how many years do I have left? And at the same time, so many of these books are out of print. I see on the Hare Krishna Book Exchange,
Yep.
people are looking for these books,
Yep.
and they want them, and they're willing to pay for them. And you know what I mean? And I'm thinking, well, imagine in another 30 years, they're going to be worth even more. But my children, it's not something they're, so keen. Like for me, it's my most valued possession. But for them, they wouldn't, be that excited to inherit all of these books and have to have more bookcases and all of that. So anyway, but still, if I do divest, it has to be to somebody young. So I know, they'll have them for a long time.
Yeah.
Because when somebody even older than me asks for a book, that's very, very rare. You know how now the big thing is they want unedited books. And so I think, well, they're going to die pretty soon anyway. May as well give it to or somebody young who will cherish it for much longer.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, so thanks for that, though. I really like that book a lot. And yeah.
We listened repeatedly to the audio version while we were physically going through one of our many storage units that we had rented. And
Mhm.
the sound vibration helped us while our limbs were in action.
Mm.
And one thing I've done, because I don't collect guitars, but I have more than I can play at one time.
Uh-huh.
And so what I've done is I've prepared to sell them all by creating like sale pages for them online. All you have to do is press one button, and then instantly it's for sale, and the money just comes in.
Mm.
So I don't know if
And
something. Oh, we have another a chat comment by
Chat comments.
Sankarshan. Yes, I can read it if you don't mind, or if you'd like to read it,
Sure.
you can. Sankarshan Prabhu says, if you're not attached to stuff you have, it doesn't seem so necessary to get rid of it. Getting rid of stuff takes a lot of time and energy. Not even thinking about it makes more time for Krishna consciousness.
yeah. And makes more room. Well, eliminating makes more space to, to have higher things and consciousness. I'm on my phone. I don't know how to mute myself on my phone.
Would you like you? I can do that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You've been muted. I can no longer hear what you're saying, and I just unmuted you. Okay. All right.
The one thing is that there may be places where things that we've accumulated could really be valuable. The Oxford Center Library, Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, or Mayapur Institute Library, or other such institutions that might really be interested in some of the things that we have. Or if they're really old manuscripts, my goodness, notes from old seminars or something, they could be valuable in the right place. So part of divestment is divesting wisely, knowing where things could go that they'd be most useful. Something like writing your will, you figure out who's going to be the best people to inherit things. It's just that you do it in advance. And it is hard to get rid of stuff sometimes. Speaking of CDs and cassettes, the archives, when I was a trustee there, had a director there, had big inventory of cassettes, and they were just sitting there, and it took a while to determine that yes, these should all be valued down to zero because they no longer have value on the balance sheet. So and by the time everybody was ready to get rid of them, it was too late. Nobody even wanted a cassette anymore, and CDs pretty much have gone the same way. So So it's not only individuals, but organizations that have the same problem getting rid of stuff that we think, no, this really has value, even when it no longer does.
I had a comment, if there's time. I was thinking about how many of the principles that have come up about Vanaprastha in the course of our talks have been maybe more or less based on how an ideal working Vedic civilization would operate. At the same time, I feel like Prabhupada himself was dealing with people on a case-by-case basis, that many people, instead of having their brahmachari life be from age 5 to 25, they had that period that was just made for brahmachari life. Instead, they lived it in ignorant pursuit of sense gratification. And then when they're 25, they take up some semblance of brahmachari life, and that lasts for however many years. And then they take up some semblance of grihastha life, and where many of the points that you've raised in the course of these talks are really going to be valuable down the road, when you have generations of people that have been practicing Krishna consciousness thinking about these things at the proper time. Like you plan to become a Vanaprastha when you're still a brahmachari. You know that's coming, so you mentally prepare. And what I was thinking and pondering is that because everything is less than ideal, it seems that if the principle of some kind of outreach is on your mind, and even better yet, part of your active day plan, then the phrase "preaching is the essence" makes whatever situation you're in more ideal, whether you're a grihastha or a vanaprastha or an attempted vanaprastha, than if you weren't doing it. So even if your situation is so far from what the ideal Vanaprastha life might be, simply by taking on some preaching project, other things will fall into line where they might not otherwise, if you were just trying to be a Vanaprastha for the sake of, being an ideal Vedic person in a less than ideal Vedic time.
Nice realization. As you say, preaching is the essence, and even you can think about our original London grihasthas, who were more like sannyasis. They're living with nothing, practically speaking. So the mentality is so crucial. Where's my attachment? What is my thinking? So that if preaching is up front, that's very much an advantage or a credit that even I think of an example of Prithu Shrava and his wife Damayanti, who've been, they're just preachers, and they're not officially Vanaprasthas, but their life is a detached life. So if preaching is in the forefront, then, as you say, like, other things fall into line. So a great advantage, which is not to say that we can't still at some point go further, but it's such an excellent, Don Cayley, thank you, not Damayanti, Don Cayley. It's not to say things can't go further, but it's so excellent when preaching is up front. That practically is the essence. Thank you.
I actually thought of another analogy for that. Like in the science of Vastu, you can have a building, say, that's aligned all wrong. All the four corners are pointing to the wrong directions. The entrance is in the wrong direction. Everything is inauspicious. But if on your property you have a cow with her calf, then that trumps every other negative thing that might be true about your property. So I was thinking about that in regards to preaching, that your life can be just all wrong from the Vedic point of view. But if you're using everything in Krishna's service, then, you know, you're good, more or less.
Yeah. Excellent. Would others like to contribute?
Hi, Krishna.
Kelsey Priya, go
Hare
ahead.
Krishna.
I had a question for Maharaj. There's a sort of a trend or a phenomenon called, they call it FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And this is people who are, you know, they decided at an early age that they want to not work the rest of their lives. And so they hustle. They, you know, generally they have, even without a very high-paying job, a lot of them are able to save enough money that they can quit working at a relatively young age, like before 50, and or before 40 even. And I was just wondering, you know, we talk a lot, devotees talk a lot about living a balanced life. But I'm thinking to myself, does it make sense for a person who wants to follow the process of, you know, become Vanaprastha and, you know, maybe devote themselves to a certain, you know, wholeheartedly to preaching and Krishna conscious practice by a certain age, but because they're going through the stages of life, they have children, they have wife or husband, would it make sense to have that kind of very laser-like focus? Yes, I'm going to make all my money in the next 10 or 15 years, and then boom. I know somebody who thought like that, and his situation was a little different because he performed an illegal activity and wound up going to prison, where he has nothing but time to focus on his Krishna conscious practice. But I'm just saying, in a normal, ordinary way, does it make sense for people to focus more on the financial aspects and become very focused on that without neglecting Krishna consciousness completely, so that later on in life they can say, okay, now I'm Vanaprastha, now I don't have to think about anything else? Or, you know, I think I'm belaboring the point now, but you get, you get what I'm saying.
There's two things that we could say, several things, but two branches of it. First thing is that it does make sense if you're in householder life to, I would say, not just think about making a lot of money, but if you're plan that this is not going to be for forever. So I have my goals. I want to retire early. Therefore, I'd like to make X amount of money or have X amount of money by the time I'm 40 or 50. And in that way, put things together, particularly since there is no, or isn't much of, a traditional support system. The number of sons who are ready to support their mothers, the number of communities who are full of grastas who feel responsible for Vanaprasthas, it's not quite there yet. So from that point of view, there's a sense to it that, all right, we'll work this way, particularly for the wife's benefit. The husband should be capable of greater independence. So that's one thought. And that doesn't necessarily, as you say, entail working harder, but it involves frugality. It involves intelligent use of resources, and so on. So that one has a plan. It's not just I work, I make money, I spend, I work, I make money, I spend. But there's a plan there. We work, we put some aside. And I talked about earlier the sort of planning that Ananda Vrindavan Prabhu in Bombay has recommended, where you're always putting something aside for a contingency fund. So that's one thought. Not everyone can do that simply because some people have bad money karma, you know, money just runs away from you. But if it's possible, that's a thought. And if one can do that without sacrificing one's spiritual life, still staying in balance and not just being laser focused on money, but having one's spiritual life going on well. So that's
Somebody
one
needs to be
side.
muted.
Then the other side is that we should be prepared for the eventuality that it may not just work that way. For one reason or another, money may not come. Prabhupada himself experienced financial reverses in his family life, and who knows what may happen. So we should be prepared for the eventuality that, well, I may just have to depend on Krishna because there may not be cash on hand to depend on. And as Prabhupada said, God has his plan. So both things, we can make our plan and try to have a, prudent financial arrangement for our retirement. And at the same time, we shouldn't be so dependent on that. We should be doing that, and at the same time knowing that finally it's Krishna that I have to depend on. Those would be my thoughts on that.
I agree. I feel like because at least with in American culture, we're not so organized about our finances. You know, we tend to rack up debt, and we're not trained about this in school. It's not part of our culture. So I feel like even if we don't retire early, just learning the techniques for living a more frugal life that could possibly enable us to retire early is a good practice. And also in terms of properly engaging Krishna's energy in the form of Lakshmi, you know, treating it with respect. I think that's an important thing. I'll be posting some links on the Facebook page of things that I've done research on. There's a website called Mr. Money Mustache. There's Dave Ramsey, who's okay. He gives good advice, but he also charges a lot of money for his seminars, and Mr. Money Mustache is free. But yeah, I agree with you that it's not a given, but even considering that, it's just really good to be conscious about money. I think that's good for our Krishna consciousness too, because if we see Krishna's energy, then you know it's another layer of our Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, it's Krishna's money. It should be carefully husbanded, and particularly one has to be careful about borrowing. In general, borrowing is bad. Borrowing from banks and paying bank interest, credit cards and all that. You're just paying for the wind. The Vamsidhari says, all these possessions and attachments come from home. Is it viable thinking to go to temple in Vanaprastha and sell our home possessions and live with bare necessities in the temple? It may be. Just our here in Tuaco, our Vrindavan Chandra and his wife Yashomati, they retired from family life and they got rid of their home, and they've been staying in the temple and doing service. They've been the mainstay of the temple now for many, many years. So that is possible. That's one of the ways of Vanaprastha life, to live in one holy place, not to travel around, but to live in one place. So that is possible. One should probably be conscious that ISKCON temples have their vicissitudes, that management changes, attitudes change, and therefore to think of the temple as a source of security, like a guarantee, like an insurance policy, may be unrealistic. Always we have to keep in our mind that it's Krishna that I have to depend on. But this can be a very happy life, that let me divest myself of all the stuff that goes with a home and home improvements and home payments and home insurance and home this and home that, utilities and taxes, and simply stay in the temple and do service and live with the bare necessities. If I am going to stay in the temple, that's what I should be doing. If we're staying in a temple, actually the standard is that husband and wife should live separately. Prabhupada made that standard many, many years ago. And so that can be very nice. That can be, and then be ready also that, well, if circumstances change, then we'll change. We'll change. But yes, that's very nice. Something else.
Maharaj?
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I had another idea. I honestly, I can't. I had this discussion with my husband. I can't remember if I brought it up in these meetings. The idea is that we have a lot of younger devotees who grew up in the movement. They're developing careers. We have older devotees who never developed careers and are struggling. And we have some devotees who have been very successful in life. Oh yeah, I did bring it up. I was talking about, people who have been successful instead of maybe just focusing on themselves, if they're still more dynamically inclined to maybe help set up communities, buying land, creating a development. It's a big hassle, it's entangling. But if people are not ready to become retired, that maybe they devote their energies towards other, to establishing more of a varnashram community typing, and then leaving it, once it's set up, leaving it for the younger generations to take over, and then they retire if there's still time left. But there's something for people to plug into that there isn't really now available to all the devotees that are just living their lives in the mainstream world.
Well, anyone at any age can do that. Anyone who's making money and is a little inspired can start thinking of different things that they could do by way of charity, by way of a social contribution for the Vanaprasthas, for the brahmacharis. Sannyasis don't have too much. They're doing fine in ISKCON these days, but particularly for the Vanaprasthas, retired people, widows, and so on. Whether one is older and well set up, or one is younger but earning well, one can consider being charitable in this way, or making a contribution in this way for social development. It is kind of social development, which of course, yes. Does that answer your thought? Does that address your thought?
I think so. I guess, I really don't know what there is in ISKCON as far as people who are very successful and experienced. I guess I'm thinking older people because they have more experience. I think of somebody like Ambarish Prabhu, who, he's, known for being pretty wealthy, working on the Mayapur temple project. But I imagine that there are others, who on some lesser level could do something, and but I guess it's for them to come up with the idea. Little old me over here is not going to tell somebody, who's a tycoon or a head of a corporation what they should do with themselves.
No,
the idea is out there.
As this discussion, we hope, expands, then people may start thinking of these things also. Vamsidhari says, I have an 8-hour training program on personal finance and how to manage it intelligently and plan for retirement by age of 50 if started earning by 25. If needed, I can do this session. Well, we have 14 people on this Zoom conference. I think for your seminar, there'd be 140. So it sounds like a very good idea. And if you'd like to be in touch with me, maybe we could set that up as something that we could offer. This is New York, Brooklyn's Zoom channel. That might be an offering that we could put on as part of the curriculum, as it were, or part of the seminars that New York offers, or Tuaco. So get in touch with me about that, and that would be, I'm sure, very popular. And
thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, I will share that. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
I even have a seminar I could do on that, but I'm sure yours would be better. I have an entrepreneurship seminar. We can get together. I have an entrepreneurship seminar I could do, although I'm not an entrepreneur, but I learned something from a multimillionaire friend. But I think your seminar, yes, let's do it.
Yeah. Actually, I have been following all this since last 17 years now. And based on my own personal experience and realization, I can share, like, it won't be a theoretical thing. It would be a fully practical thing, which everybody can implement.
We'll blow the trumpets and put out the news, and I'm sure a lot of people will come.
Okay. Yeah, and it's on the line of what Anand Vindan teaches. So it's on the same line, like so it's not different from that. But
even sannyasis could come so that they could advise their grahastas disciples, It would be very useful.
Yeah, and this after to Krishna consciousness, it makes more sense because I started here following all the practices, just the materialism that I wanted to get off 9 job and do what I want to pursue other interests.
I'm getting real problems on the connection here. Everything's bouncing. Is that just me? Probably not, because everybody else I heard well. Maybe if you slow down a little bit and say that again.
Okay. What I'm saying is that I started following all the practices.
Not working. Is this me, or is this?
No, it's not just you, Maharaj. It's that his connection's sketchy.
Your connection has degraded from Siddhari Prabhu.
Okay.
I guess there's not too much we can. You could try turning off your. That's right.
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yes. That was magic.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was saying that I started following all these personal finance practices like 15 years back. At that time, I was in Krishna consciousness, and my only goal was to become financially independent so that I could do something else, materially, like travel around or, maybe pursue some hobbies or interest or something like that. But once last 3 years, 3.5, one came to Krishna consciousness, it made much more sense. And I got the purpose that, yes, this is the purpose for which maybe I was doing it. And then now Krishna gave me a real direction that which will help me and which will help maybe others, So Krishna consciousness practice, it makes much more sense.
Yeah, this gives practical shape to Varnashram. Just like Prabhupada was saying, how if you live if you're growing your own food, you only have to work for a couple of months, and then the other months are free for Krishna consciousness. So that takes some work, some experience, some knowledge how to do that. So here also, if I'm in householder life, how do I make it something that's not, what would you say, a perpetual struggle to stay afloat, or else a perpetual indulgence program, but sane, well thought out, with a clear trajectory, a clear plan, so that by the time one reaches 50, one can make the next step in a Krishna conscious way and not be sort of dealing with so many difficulties that one didn't need to have. By nature's arrangement, there may be any kind of difficulty at any time. But at least if we plan intelligently, we get the best shot at it. That if all goes well, and then the plan works, and we can move on. So this is very, very much welcome. It's a necessary feature, I would say, for the social arrangement. Individually, we should all be prepared that if things go south, still, I have my determination to be detached from material affairs. But this provides a practical framework in the normal sort of way of social advancement. So very much welcome. Panchatattva says we shouldn't be like a hamster on a wheel, working furiously, but going nowhere, as so many people are. And especially, the materialists, they're working hard to pay for their booze, their cigarettes, there's so many things. And then that further, then to pay for the health costs brought on by their alcohol and their cigarettes. So sane, regulated life, and then financially prudent, and then with a strong basis of hearing and chanting, so that the life can become really sane, sensible, and even exemplary. People say, like, I don't know their philosophy, but I kind of like to live like the Hare Krishnas. I met so many Hare Krishnas. They like retire at 45, and they're, and I wish I could do that. So, very much welcome.
It would be great if people would say things like that about Hare Krishnas, like they do about the Amish.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly of them. They're well organized socially. They know where they're going with their life. They know that the son knows that he's going to inherit a certain amount, not even inherit, a certain amount of property will be set aside for him. He knows where his life is going to go. And that makes the other things that he wants to do practical and easy. If we know that we have a sensible plan for the material side of our life, then we can really focus on the spiritual side. Now, the material nature being what it is, despite all our plans, everything may be nutty, but it doesn't mean that it should be nutty because we're disorganized, blind, lazy, or just in the dark, or aimless. If despite our best efforts and best planning and prudence and so on, things don't work out, well, Hardy Bol. But the first thing is, let us try to do it nicely, and then, all right, if Krishna doesn't desire, then, or if Krishna smashes me, well, good. But otherwise, yes, sensible, prudent, especially for family life. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's mentioned, first thing he did once he got married, he went and made some money. He went and made some money because householders need money. Brahmacharis, sannyasis, we're not going to worry about it. But for family life, these things are to be considered. We have a few minutes more. Would someone else like to contribute something? Something you've read, or something you've thought about, or something that you've done or you're doing or thinking of doing in regard to Vanaprastha life?
I had one thing I've been thinking about, and it sort of came up in this session and maybe in other sessions, but it's curious that we've been discussing this topic of Vanaprastha during a pandemic when people are not traveling anywhere at the risk of their own life. And the classic Vanaprastha mode we're presented with is that the husband and wife travel to places of pilgrimage, and that's just not happening at the present moment. And I was wondering, I know there's such a thing as kshetra sannyas, where you just stay put and you preach there, and that's where you stay. And I was wondering if the Vanaprastha might be a pliable enough ashram that there could be such a thing as Kshetra Vanaprastha, minus the forest, because we don't really have them suitable for living these days. But
that is one of the models of Vanaprastha life.
Yeah.
The one model is the husband and wife travel from place to place, or another model is that the husband and wife, or else just the husband, they goes to one particular place. Vrindavan is meant for that. Prabhupada made the guest house for that, so that retired gentlemen, Prabhupada said, could retire to Vrindavan. So it's very much in the Vanaprastha mode. To even Prabhupada, he sat down in Vrindavan. So that's very much a model one can take. Sit down in one place. I gave the instruction, I think I conveyed. Prabhupada was asked by one elderly couple actually in Fiji, what should be their duty. And Prabhupada told him, more jap. And he told the wife to be engaged in the service of the deity. He didn't say, travel all around. Stay where you are, but not family life. You chant, do bhajan, chant Hare Krishna, you worship the deity, and that's what they did, and they're very happy doing that. So that's certainly an option. During the pandemic, I was thinking it's a great opportunity for hearing and chanting in association, and I think we're all finding that. In the Gulf, where there's the holy month of Ramadan, people work half a day during that month, in respect of the holiday. So then what the devotees did was they started organizing Bhagavad Gita, because now they have only half a day that they have to work. So that month of Ramadan became really an impetus, really an opportunity for hearing and chanting, and so much enthusiasm and spiritual energy is generated that way. So similarly, Chaturmasya is meant for that. Even the traveling sages sit down because travel is impractical. So here we have this pandemic. It's despite all of its unhappy side, it's very suitable for more hearing, more chanting, and more digital association. Speaking of which, I think Madhumati is tonight's speaker on the Tuwako channel, and their program starts in 3 minutes from now. So I think it's our tradition here to try to stop a couple of minutes early and give everyone a chance to shift over. So thank you all very much. And again, if you can be thinking about noticing things that you read and considering what these things mean to you, what your realizations are, and also actions that you might take or that you are taking, and consider sharing these things in this seminar. That will be great moving forward. Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to
Thank you,
Shiva.
Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Krishna, thank you.
Hare
Hari
Krishna.
Bol.
Hari Bol.
Jaya.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Now you can do it.
Hari Bol.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you,
Okay, I'm
Maharaj.
just going to.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Bye all. Hare Krishna.